They said no woman ever ran from St. Aurelia Plantation. Not one in over 70 years. That was the first lie. The second was buried beneath the southern magnolias, where the earth was soft and the air always smelled of iron. Locals whispered that the women there did not need chains, that they stayed because they were grateful, because they were loved. But the census ledgers from 1843 tell another story. 27 women entered those gates. Only 15 were ever recorded leaving. The rest? Erased, names struck through in pale ink. When the plantation was auctioned after the war, the buyers found something in the sub-basement beneath the east house. The floor was bricked in a perfect circle, sealed with lime and wax. They thought it was a root cellar, but the bricks were hollow. And inside, beneath layers of packed clay, they found the first remains, a hand, perfectly preserved, clutching a rosary made of bone. The sheriff's report from that year never made it to the county archive. The priest who blessed the land vanished 6 months later. All that remains today is a single name, burned into a wooden beam near the cellar entrance. Aurelia. No one knows who she was, only that she was the first and the last to scream beneath the house. The 1872 auction was supposed to be routine. St. Aurelia Plantation had been abandoned since the war, its fields overgrown, the manor sinking into the wet soil like something ashamed of itself. But men still came, bankers, land brokers, and opportunists, hoping to buy cheap and build new fortunes on the ghosts of old ones. The first man to walk through the front door was Elias Dorn, a former Confederate officer turned surveyor. In his report to the county, he wrote a strange line that no one ever bothered to question. The air in the east wing moves without wind, as though it remembers breathing. That was the only note he made before resigning from the commission and leaving the state entirely. The property passed through 5 hands in the next decade. Each new owner claimed to hear something different at night. A child crying in the fields, a woman humming beneath the floors, a door opening to a room that didn't exist by day. By 1886, the plantation had become a local curse. The people of Iberville Parish began to call it the Silent House, warning travelers not to stay past dusk. Old women crossed themselves when its name was mentioned. Children were told that Aurelia still walked there, counting names on a list that no one living could see. But one man, a historian named Samuel Tull, refused to believe in superstition. He came to document what he called Southern hysteria. He would be the first outsider to uncover the entrance to the breeding Cella, and the last to ever describe it in words. Samuel Tull arrived at St. Aurelia in the summer of 1891. He was a thin, bookish man from Boston, trained to trust records, not rumors. He believed that every haunting could be traced to misfiled history, to grief trapped in ink. He spent 3 nights cataloging what the last owners had left behind: rotting ledgers, baptismal rolls, broken portraits of white men posing beside women who never smiled. He slept in the library, near a window that looked out over the drowned orchard. On the 4th night, he heard it, a steady rhythm, not footsteps, not rain, a heartbeat, low, hollow, pulsing through the floorboards beneath his cot. He followed it with a lantern and a trembling hand, tracing the sound down a corridor lined with family portraits. Their painted eyes followed him into the east wing. The heartbeat grew louder near a warped patch of flooring. When he pried up the boards, he found a stone ring beneath, carved with symbols older than the plantation itself. It wasn't listed on any blueprint. The ring was warm to the touch, even though the cellar air was cold. Inside his field notes, his handwriting breaks. The sentences stutter. One line repeats 13 times. They were born here. The next morning, the caretaker found his lantern still burning beside the open floor. Tull was gone. The papers he left behind were collected, sealed, and never published. But one page, torn from his notebook, was found years later in a seminary archive. It bore only 3 words: "The womb remembers." In 1903, a new family bought St. Aurelia for a fraction of its value. The Bellinghams, a devout Catholic lineage from Georgia. They claimed they wanted to build a mission school for fallen girls. Within months, the townsfolk began whispering again. Each week, wagons arrived under moonlight, carrying young women who never seemed to leave. The church said they were orphans. The census said nothing at all. The parish priest, Father Delancey, kept meticulous records of baptisms, but those pages were torn from the church registry after his death. What remained was a single ledger hidden in the rectory basement, a list of births, marked only by dates and numbers. No mothers' names, no fathers, only initials, written in red ink beside a symbol shaped like an inverted crown. Locals claimed the Bellinghams were breeding servants of the cloth, children destined for the church. But the truth was older and colder. During the winter floods of 1907, a worker clearing debris from the old east wing found another entrance beneath the altar floor. It descended into blackness. The smell rising from below was not of rot, but of blood gone to iron. The worker quit the same night, muttering about voices that whispered in Latin, calling him Filius Perditionis, son of perdition. The priest blessed the entrance with holy water and sealed it with bricks. But that same month, 3 girls vanished from the mission. The parish called it a tragedy. The townspeople called it something else, a birth that should never have happened. For nearly 2 decades, the plantation lay silent again, until 1924. That spring, a journalist named Etta Vaughn arrived from New Orleans, chasing rumors of a ghost convent. She found only ruins, ivy choking the windows, the chapel bell half buried in soil. In the east wing, she discovered etchings on the wall, drawn in what looked like soot and candle grease. They were portraits, crude, childlike, showing women with hollow faces, their bellies swollen. Under each drawing, a single word, Aurelia. Etta spent 3 days documenting the site. On the 4th night, she made her final entry in her notebook. They are not ghosts. They are waiting. When a search party arrived a week later, her camera was gone, her tent burned to ash. All they found was her crucifix, melted and fused to a rusted key. Local stories say Etta joined them, that she became one of Aurelia's daughters, still wandering the flooded fields in a white gown, whispering to unborn names. By 1930, no one dared enter the plantation, not even the curious. The earth had reclaimed most of it, swallowing rooms whole. But under the silt, the breeding cella remained. Its door, they say, never rusted. Its hinges still breathed. And once every 7 years, on the same night Aurelia's name was first written, the ground above it moved, as if something below was trying to be born again. The Mississippi flood of 1937 swallowed most of Iberville Parish. The old St. Aurelia grounds became an island of brick and bone. When the waters receded, the soil split open like old flesh, revealing things the river should have kept. A team of state workers came to survey the damage. They found the east wing entirely collapsed, the altar stones cracked in 2. Beneath them lay the stairs, those same stairs Father Delancey had once sealed with bricks. The men descended 20 feet before their lanterns began to flicker. The smell grew unbearable, metallic, sweet, wrong. They saw cages first, small ones, then tables, stone, etched with the same inverted crown that appeared in the Bellingham ledger. The youngest worker, barely 19, stumbled upon a wall carved with hundreds of names. Each name ended in a number. Each number was followed by the same symbol, infinity. The report they filed afterward was brief, just 4 sentences. The final one read, "Site secured, entry prohibited." 2 of those men later went missing. One drowned himself in the river. The other, they say, was last seen walking barefoot toward the ruins, whispering to something in the dark. After the flood, the diocese ordered the plantation exorcised. Father Ignatius Rowe, a Jesuit known for handling unusual disturbances, arrived in 1938. He stayed for 3 days. The townspeople heard the chapel bell ring each night at exactly 3:03 a.m., the hour of inversion, as Rowe later called it. On the final night, the bell rang 13 times, then fell silent forever. When a search party entered the next morning, the chapel door was locked from the inside. They broke it open to find no priest, no signs of struggle, only his cassock folded neatly on the altar, and a handwritten note. The voice calls itself Mater Inversa. She says the womb was never meant to close. The church sealed the property again, this time under ecclesiastical order. All parish maps erased its location, but the locals still knew where it was. They claimed the bell still rang on cold nights, the sound deep and wet, as if struck from under the earth instead of above it. And sometimes, if you stood close enough to the ruins, you could hear what came after the 13th toll, a single, gasping breath. By 1944, St. Aurelia had vanished from all official records. The town surrounding it, Bellwater Parish, was redistricted, renamed, and refiled. It was as if the land itself had been deleted. But something lingered. The new parishioners began reporting dreams of infants crying beneath their floors, of water rising through the walls. Women who moved into the nearby fields suffered fevers that left them sterile. A nurse at the county hospital kept her own notes. She called it the silence disease. In every case, the patients said the same thing before they went mute. She's still having them. When the nurse tried to trace the source of the infection, she realized all the women had ancestors who once lived or worked near St. Aurelia. The sickness wasn't spreading. It was remembering. And every generation, it called another woman back to the land where the womb first opened. In 1951, the Army Corps of Engineers sent a geological team to Bellwater to assess the swamp's stability. They didn't know what they were walking into. Their instruments malfunctioned near the plantation's foundation. Compasses spun. Radios hissed with whispers that sounded like overlapping prayers. The lead surveyor, Captain Roland Gray, filed a strange memo to Washington. Magnetic field inconsistent. Area emits low-frequency pulse. Suspect buried machinery of unknown origin. Machinery. When his men dug beneath the cellar, they unearthed a structure of black stone, smooth as glass and shaped like a spiral descending into the mud. Not natural. Not man-made. The team was pulled out within 48 hours. All records stamped classified, biological. Gray resigned that same month. 3 years later, he was institutionalized after carving symbols into his own chest, spirals within spirals, identical to the floor markings in the Cella. He left behind one last drawing, scrawled in blood on his hospital wall. The spiral is the womb. The womb is the mouth. She is still speaking. By 1962, Bellwater Parish was nearly empty. The river had shifted course again, washing away the last visible remains of the plantation. And yet, something began to stir. Letters started appearing in parish mailboxes, and signed, postmarked from nowhere. Each contained a single phrase written in old script. Aurelia calls her daughters home. Within months, 7 women from different towns vanished. No connection, no shared relatives. But each of them had an identical birthmark on the underside of the wrist, an inverted crown. Police dismissed it as coincidence. The press called it hysteria. But one night in late November, a pilot flying over the floodplain reported seeing lights forming a spiral in the darkness. Dozens of small fires arranged in a perfect pattern, circling a single black center. The next morning, nothing remained but scorched earth. And in the soil, search teams found handprints. Hundreds of them, pressed into the mud as if reaching up from below to by 1975. Bellwater was gone from new maps, but archivists at Louisiana State University kept stumbling over its ghost. A graduate researcher named Clara Hume uncovered a mislabeled crate of parish documents. Inside were brittle pages marked with the Bellingham seal, and beneath them, a single photograph, a spiral carved into stone, surrounded by women's shoes arranged in circles. Clara became obsessed. She traced every missing person from 1900 onward and realized something. All disappearances occurred exactly 63 days apart. 9 weeks, the full term of a premature birth. She traveled to the floodplain herself in 1977. Her final field tape ends mid-sentence. If this was ever a church, it was built inside, static, not above. Rescuers found her Jeep half submerged, the driver's door open, the seat soaked but the key still in the ignition. Her notebooks were recovered. Their ink bled into a single repeating line. The daughters are the mothers. In 1983, the diocese quietly reopened a new orphanage 30 miles away under another name, Our Lady of Perpetual Grace. The matron kept portraits of saints on every wall, except one blank space above the nursery door. Children there claimed to see a woman standing in that spot at night, face hidden, hands folded over a swollen belly. The matron called it imagination until infants began to vanish from their cribs. No broken locks, no footprints, only a faint smell of river water. When inspectors arrived, they found the basement flooded ankle-deep. Beneath the water, tiles bore a faint spiral pattern. The orphanage closed within the year, officially for mold contamination. The surviving children all developed the same nightmare later in life. A voice whispering, "Go back to where you were made." In 1992, a federal environmental team drilled core samples near the original plantation site to test for chemical waste. At 30 feet down, their drill bit struck metal that rang like a bell. The readings spiked, a low hum around 19 hertz, the fear frequency, known to trigger panic and visions. The team logged the phenomenon as sub-resonant anomaly. That night, every motion sensor on the site tripped simultaneously, though no bodies were present. Security footage showed the earth moving, like breath beneath skin. 2 months later, the project was abandoned without explanation. The lead geologist, Dr. Hastings, testified in a private memo. The ground is gestating. Do not disturb it again. Early 2000s. A small congregation calling itself the Order of Aurelia Mater surfaced online. Their sermons mixed Catholic prayers with fertility chants and fragments of Latin from Father Rowe's lost journal. They believed the plantation's Cella was a divine womb that once created pure vessels. They called themselves the Reborn. In 2006, local police raided their gathering in an abandoned sugar mill. What they found was not violence, but silence. 23 women kneeling in mud, humming at exactly 19 hertz, eyes rolled white. At the center was a pit lined with salt and ashes shaped into a spiral. The women were taken into custody, but within a week each one disappeared from state care. Doors still locked, no sign of escape. Only one phrase was left scrawled on a wall. She called from below. We went home. By 2013, most people had dismissed Saint Aurelia as myth, until historian Dr. Len Tull, grandson of Samuel Tull, gave a lecture titled The Womb That Remembers. He played a restored recording from his grandfather's damaged wax cylinder. At first, it was static. Then, a rhythmic sound, soft, organic, unmistakable. A heartbeat. When the beat slowed, another sound joined it. A woman's voice whispering in reverse Latin. Linguists later translated fragments, phrases meaning open, return, and be made again. The audience thought it was performance art. But days later, Dr. Tull was found at the banks of the river, alive but unresponsive, his hand pressed to the mud as if feeling for something beneath. He's been silent ever since. Doctors say his pulse sometimes matches the rhythm on that recording exactly. In 2018, a film student from Baton Rouge launched a drone over the floodplain for a class project. She didn't know what she was flying above. The drone's GPS failed as it crossed the area once mapped as Bellwater Parish. The feed glitched, then cleared, showing what looked like a wide circle of dry ground in the center of the marsh. In the middle was a spiral of stones. No footprints, no vegetation, just the pattern. When she replayed the footage later, she noticed something else. For exactly 9 frames, a figure appeared at the spiral's center. A pale woman standing ankle-deep in water, head tilted upward, eyes closed. The local sheriff dismissed it as video error. But the girl stopped attending classes soon after. Her professor later found a note on her desk written in charcoal. She looked at me. She knew I could hear. The footage was quietly taken down. But some who saw it claimed that if you listen closely to the audio, under the buzz of the drone, you can hear a faint heartbeat, one that speeds up whenever the camera draws closer to the spiral. In 2020, freelance journalist Naomi Vance began producing a podcast series about forgotten American hauntings. One episode, never released, was titled The Breeding Cellar. Her notes, later found in a motel room near Iberville, detail interviews with locals who still remembered the stories. One old woman said, Aurelia wasn't a name. It was a title. It meant the first mother. Naomi's audio diary ends with the sound of running water and her voice whispering. It's not underground anymore. Her car was recovered 3 miles from the site. Inside the glove box were maps marked with spirals spreading outward from the old plantation ruins, as if the ground itself were replicating the shape, reaching farther each year. In 2022, agricultural scientists testing nearby farmland made an unexpected discovery. The soil contained human mitochondrial DNA, not from remains, but woven into the clay itself. It was maternal in origin. They couldn't explain how it got there. The age of the sample suggested centuries. Yet the DNA showed signs of recent biological activity, replication, as though it were alive. One lab technician later admitted that under the microscope, the cells appeared to be forming shapes, tiny spirals, pulsing faintly. He quit the project and refused to speak again. The report was never published, but a leaked abstract surfaced online. Its title, Evidence of Persistent Maternal Echoes in Louisiana Soil. Most people dismissed it as hoax, but those who had heard the drone recording knew better. On the night of December 31st, 2024, the rare 13th moon, residents across the southern floodplain reported tremors. Not an earthquake, not thunder, a rhythm. Sensors captured a pulse coming from beneath the old Bellwater Basin, synchronized perfectly with the lunar cycle. Wildlife fled the area. Birds circled in tight spirals before dropping into the marsh. The river's current reversed for 6 full minutes. Satellite imagery later showed a glowing pattern beneath the water, faint, circular, alive. The next morning, a new mound stood where the spiral once was. No one has dared to excavate it. But those who live near the parish claim that at night, you can see steam rising from the ground, and sometimes, just before dawn, hear the cry of an infant carried on the fog. Today, St. Aurelia Plantation exists only as a story, a scar on maps no one prints anymore. But every archive, every sealed record, every whispered memory carries the same echo. The womb remembers. Historians debate whether it was ever real, whether the breeding Cella was a place, a symbol, or a metaphor for the sins the country tried to bury. But memory is not soil. It doesn't stay buried. And somewhere, beneath the river's skin, the spiral still turns, slow, patient, alive, waiting for the next flood, waiting for the next daughter to hear the call and follow it home. Because nothing ever truly dies at St. Aurelia. It only sleeps and dreams of being born again.